Hi, and welcome to the And One podcast. I am your host, Alex West, and after a month-long hiatus, I have returned with special guest, Celtics Outsider Andrew Johnson. He's going to give us his rapid reaction to the trade that sent Kyrie Irving to the Boston Celtics and Isaiah Thomas to the Cleveland Cavaliers, so we're glad to get to have him on the show today. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a little breakdown. I let Andrew kind of take the wheel and talk about it, but before we get started, I'll give you my take on it. I think this was one of those trades in the NBA that is good for both teams. The Celtics acquired a 25-year-old potential franchise player. He's a potential franchise player. Hopefully, with the growth of Jaylen Brown, the addition of Jason Tatum, two guys that the Celtics are going to be leaning on heavily. Obviously, the addition of Gordon Hayward. Under the wings of Brad Stevens, I think that the Celtics can be pretty successful, and I think it's a pretty fair bet for them. Betting on a guy who's about 6 inches taller, he's 3 years younger, and he still has 2 years under contract. And the Celtics came up against that $200 million question of did they want to pay a 5'9" player $200 million when he was on the wrong side of 30. Traditionally, players under 6 feet have not aged well, so I think the Celtics sort of circumvented the question that everyone was asking about were they going to give Kyrie Irving were they going to give Isaiah Thomas the max? And I think that now they have an answer to that. But like I said, I think it places a lot of emphasis on the younger guys. I think they need Jaylen Brown to develop. I think they need Jason Tatum to seize the reins. For Cleveland, I think acquiring Jae Crowder was an underrated asset. His best asset was his contract, which allowed them to make other moves, potentially have a little bit more money to play with when it comes time to sign a guy who gets bought out. And I think that he will be an underrated piece defending wing players, something that they really didn't have a tremendous amount of against the Golden State Warriors. They also added Isaiah Thomas coming off a hip injury, and he can replicate about 90% of what Kyrie Irving can do, so I think that's going to be successful for them. And then they added the most important piece, an unprotected first-round pick from the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that's a pretty good trade for them because they are putting a lot of chips in the basket that LeBron may indeed leave. So they've flirted with being a contender this year and then rebuilding for the future. So anyway, that's my take on it. We're going to get more into it. Andrew's going to give you his take. We're going to talk a little bit about where this puts all the teams in the East. Always thanks for listening. And Brent, take us away. All right, we're going to talk now live with the Celtics Outsider, Andrew Johnson. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm feeling outside and connected.
You have no connections to the organization, and yet you have your finger on the lifeblood of the Celtics organization.
Yeah.
And that's how you got that nickname, right?
It is actually, it's not necessarily a nickname as it is a title, an official title, and it's one I've earned by
being the Celtics Outsider.
Exactly.
All right, so you're the Celtics Outsider. Obviously, big news today. Cleveland Cavaliers, Boston Celtics swap all-star point guards. Isaiah Thomas headed to Cleveland. Kyrie headed to Boston. Jae Crowder, Ante Zizic, and the Nets unprotected 2018 first-round pick all headed to Cleveland. What was your initial reaction to this?
Flabbergasted, in a word. I think that's the first time I've ever used that correctly as well. It's just wow. Like, there's nothing beyond like initial shock and emotional reactions. The logic center of the brain didn't kick in for like 6 hours. It felt like I don't even know if it's been a live trade for 6 hours, but that's how crazy I feel.
You messaged me. So we were sort of swapping messages earlier when the news kind of broke, and the message you sent to me was, "I don't know how to feel," and I think that summed it up so perfectly. Because here was a player that 2 months ago at the end of the NBA Finals, we would probably say was the third best player in the Eastern Conference behind LeBron and John Wall. And then his trade value just gets tanked through this whole process where we examine him, we re-examine him. How do you feel about Kyrie Irving? I mean, now he's a Celtic. Now he's on the team. What do you think about him now?
You definitely started feeling bad about a guy who wants off of a team with LeBron. Like, that threw up some red flags, but now that he's a Celtic and you can look at it through those Kelly Green colored glasses, I'm seeing that guy who he carried the Cavs through a lot of big games this postseason. A lot of games. The game they won against the Warriors, Kyrie looked nigh unstoppable. When he's on, the man is a machine.
He was also really big in, what was it, Game 4, the Celtics game, the Eastern Conference Finals?
He killed it.
Yeah.
He killed it. LeBron was good. Don't get me wrong, but Kyrie, I came away every loss thinking that it was Kyrie that killed us.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. He was a guy who was legitimately difficult to guard for the Celtics. I mean, obviously no one has an answer for LeBron, but the Celtics had no real answer. Tried Avery Bradley, tried Jae Crowder, tried Marcus Smart. Yep. I mean, it really just sent a plethora of defenders against him.
And I would argue that the Celtics had the best roster composition to guard someone like Kyrie, and we couldn't do it. It was crazy.
Yeah. So let's jump into the details here. We've talked about the initial reaction. And I hate to say which team won the trade, but let's say which team do you feel like got better as a result of this trade?
I think it's a weird trade, right? Because for how different they are, Kyrie's going to slide in really well into IT's role, and I'm not sure what team's going to be better next year. Besides health and stuff. Like this is a trade for me. Like I think Kyrie, you'd say he's the best player in the trade. So I think it's easy to say the Celtics got better, but I mean, how much better remains to be seen for that amount. That's a haul. That's an absolute haul to get for Kyrie.
Yeah, Jae Crowder obviously becoming a little more expendable by adding Marcus Morris, a little bit more wing depth with Jason Tatum as well. So Jae Crowder, who didn't play spectacularly last year during the playoffs, or at least in the times that you and I have talked in our Celtic fandom, we weren't super impressed with what Jae Crowder had brought to the table, although tremendous hustle guy who really works hard on the court and is capable, is a capable scorer. I think he had a 24-point game in the Wizards series. But
a guy you want in your team for sure, 3-and-D for sure, but when you're thinking of upgradable roster spots on a team like the Celtics, that's one of the places I was looking.
Yeah, and I mean, the wing depth was just so crowded. Like, something had to give. I think the funniest part of it is I saw a tweet that said when the Celtics traded Avery Bradley, that the question was who was going to guard Kyrie Irving, and then Danny Ainge said, "Hold my beer." So now we know who's going to.
That is a great tweet. I hadn't seen that.
Comparatively, the upgrade is significant. I mean, I guess that's my question. Is the upgrade from from Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie Irving a big upgrade?
I think on an 82-game scale, like a full season, I don't actually. I think that maybe that's controversial. I don't think it's a significant upgrade. Where I think we're going to see it and be very, very happy with this trade is come playoff time. When you need someone to make something from nothing, Kyrie Irving does that better than any Celtic I've seen in my life, besides, I guess, Paul Pierce. But, I mean, I think Uncle Drew's got those handles, man. He's going to be able to get to the teeth of any defense.
Yeah, he's legitimately one of the most difficult players to guard in the league, particularly off the dribble. He's got such a tremendous handle. I mean, I think that you have to say you're probably right, because the numbers, I was looking at the numbers, don't really bear it out. Like, Isaiah was a better offensive player this year. His offensive rating was 122. Kyrie's was 116. Obviously, they're both patchwork defenders at best. I mean, the numbers don't show Kyrie Irving to be a tremendously better player. In fact, Isaiah has better numbers in a lot of ways. But I think that there's a lot to be said about a guy who's in a contract year in Isaiah Thomas, who is probably going to look for that $200 million contract, and now they've traded for a guy who's 6 inches taller, he's 3 years younger, and essentially fills the same role. But I think, I mean, while I understand it, I also think it's weird. Like, this is not the Celtics team that we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Only 4 players from that roster are still on the roster.
It's weird thinking about it. Like, it's the Celtics, same team you know and love, Brad Stevens, Danny Ainge, and oh wait, who's still on the team? What?
We've got Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Brad, and that's about it. I mean,
the team, it's completely new. It's going to be a real good chance for Kyrie to come in and be that dude if that's what he's wanting.
Yeah, and obviously that is what he's wanted. He didn't want to play with LeBron James. I mean, that's interesting, as you alluded to earlier, just wanting to be away from LeBron James and wanting to be the guy. How do you think he fits with Gordon Hayward, a guy who has been ball dominant during his time in Utah?
I think Gordon he's for lack of a better term, or maybe this is the best term, I think he's a chameleon. Gordon can play with anyone. Like, he has been ball dominant in Utah, but they used him off ball quite a bit as well. In fact, to, I would say, his detriment as a player. He's a good spot-up shooter, but I would say where he shines is being able to create. So it's going to be interesting because they do both require the ball, and I think Gordon's obviously going to play off, and he'll bend more than Kyrie has to. But I don't know. I was interested in Gordon and Isaiah, to be honest. Like, they'll work it out. Brad Stevens is a genius, but it doesn't seem like an A++ seamless fit from the outsider's perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, and as you say, you are the outsider, so you're bringing that perspective to the table. But that has been the interesting question about acquiring Gordon Hayward, pairing him with Isaiah Thomas. Now you have two guys who dominate the ball, and then Jason Tatum, who's a guy who creates with the ball in his hands. And the Celtics just sort of had this plethora of people who use the ball, and yet they had a coach and a center who excel in ball movement. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think this is going to be weird to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think this is probably Brad's most difficult coaching task that he's had. Yeah,
I'd agree, 100%. It doesn't look like a Brad Stevens team. Even those crap teams in those early years, they didn't have good talent, but they looked like a Brad Stevens team. This is going to be a very, very interesting year for Brad Stevens as the heir apparent to Greg Popovich's throne. He's got some great pieces to work with, but it's going to be very telling to see what he does with them.
Yeah, I mean, they're great pieces in their own right, but getting them to fit together will be this whole different situation that he's never really dealt with. I mean, it's one thing to have Jordan Crawford and that whole crew that the first year he was there, but this is a little bit different. I mean, there's a bunch of all-star talent on this roster. So let's ask the next logical question in this. Are the Celtics the favorite in the East?
I would say so, and I would have said they were knocking on Cleveland's door beforehand. Now, I mean, I don't know if they're going to get the first seed, but I would say in a 7-game series, I'd rather be the Celtics right now.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, I think I agree with you, but then
because I'm not 100% how much Isaiah is going to be Isaiah next year.
Okay, so that's another question that we had put on the docket to talk about. Do you think Isaiah's injury, I mean, what do you think about this? He's obviously, if you follow him on Twitter or you follow him on Instagram, he's talking about the hashtag slow grind, that slow grind. Do you think this is a little bit of a bigger deal? Do you think this is something that scared Danny Ainge?
I think it did. I think it wasn't necessarily, it was definitely a big factor. If I think I read that Danny said it was a factor, and him admitting that it's a factor, I would amplify that times 1,000 in terms of what he's thinking.
Because now you have a guy who's 28, going to be 29 by season's end, who's, I mean, take everything else aside, he's 5'8". He's 28 years old. He now has a hip injury that could be serious. I mean, a few weeks ago I'd heard that he might miss some regular season time with this.
Yep, I'd heard the same.
So I think the swap here, I mean, giving up the Brooklyn pick to upgrade it, but I think one of the upgrades that Ainge was looking for was in reliability. I mean, plus you've got 2 years longer on Kyrie's contract, a chance to extend him, and I mean, I don't know, I'm going to say this, and feel free to disagree with this, but I think that Isaiah Thomas is probably not a $200 million player, and I think that Kyrie Irving probably is a $200 million player.
From a GM's perspective, I don't want to be the guy to bet on 5'8" Isaiah Thomas coming off of a hip injury.
Going into his 30s.
Exactly. He's a speed, herky-jerky quickness guy anyways. Like, that kind of guy going into your 30s is not good. And then he's got a hip injury right on the precipice of 30. It scares me. Now, looking at the numbers, he's he's worth that. If you're just looking at the numbers, if you're height blind,
Yeah.
he's worth it. But like, it's scary. And I've been wanting Danny to find a way. I mean, I love Isaiah Thomas. I appreciate so much of what he's done to bring the Celtics back into relevance. But man, does it feel nice to not have to bank on him overcoming the odds every year. It's such a weight off my shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I've thought about as well. Is as much as we as Celtics fans all love Isaiah, that at the end of the day, $200 million for that guy that you just described, the 30-year-old with the hip injury, who's all about quickness and getting in the lane, and I don't think I want to pay $200 million to that guy, and this solves that problem.
It does beautifully, and they paid a lot. They paid a whole lot. I think more than most people were expecting, but I do think it was something that needed to be done, and I think it was an upgrade. I do.
Obviously, the Nets pick still going to be very valuable. Cleveland really came out of this trade. This is a trade that I think works for both sides. Cleveland really came out of it successfully. They gained a guy in Jae Crowder who can defend both forward positions. They got 80% of Kyrie's production, maybe more, give or take, and then they added future talent. This looks like a pretty decent draft. It looks like it's going to be kind of top-heavy with Porter and Bagley. But do you think that Brooklyn is better than we think they are? I mean, I'm digging here, but like, do you think Danny Ainge thinks Brooklyn is not a top 5 team, top 5 draft pick?
That's the first thing I looked up when I heard the trade went down, because when I saw that the pick was involved, I was like, what does Danny know that I haven't thought of? And I think most of it stems from just how bad the East could be this year. Like, the Nets, for how bad they were last year, they were coming on strong on the last portion of the season. And if they get another year under their belt, if Russell starts playing better, I don't know if the coach out there in Brooklyn is any good, but
you give him the keys to the castle. D'Angelo Russell was a zero guard. He's that prototypical Gilbert Arenas kind of player who needs the keys to the castle to be successful. And that's something that splitting time with Jordan Clarkson, they weren't really willing to do, particularly with Luke Walton's ball movement style. I think they're probably willing to let him run a little bit more in Brooklyn.
Yeah, you'd think so. And it's like, it's less about if the Nets are going to be a top 5. It's less about how good the Nets are. It's just how bad they are relative, or how good they are relative to the rest of the league, the East. And Chicago's not looking so good.
I mean, Phoenix
wasn't
good. LA has improved. I mean, they've added Brook Lopez, but the West is loaded. There are a lot of teams that can be bidding for that top spot.
It's not going to take much for the Nets, who are going to be desperate more than almost any other team, to try to not suck. For a bad team, they're going to be playing hard, and I kind of want it for the Nets at this point, but I think maybe they are a little better than the top 5. At the very least, I don't think it's 100% lock.
And now you definitely want it for the Nets. Now I want the Nets to make the playoffs.
Yeah, let the Nets win some. Come on, guys.
Like, I'm game on for the Nets. I'm going to put on my Brooklyn Nets shirt and cheer very hard for them to make the playoffs this year.
The Nets playoffs, for sure. It's insane. It probably won't happen, but I think it's in the realm. It's in the realm.
Here's a hard question for you. Is Kyrie Irving a superstar?
That's tough. I think Kyrie has the mentality, which in my mind is what separates phenomenal players from generational players. So if he's going to get there, this is a great opportunity for him to get there, and I wouldn't bet against him.
Do you think that playing with LeBron has sort of inhibited his growth as a quote-unquote superstar, like a guy who can carry the team?
I think not necessarily in terms of the product, what you see, because in playoff crunch time, when he hit the shot in 2016 or whatever.
Yeah, the Game 7-3.
He's going to play as that guy, but I think now he's going to have the gravitas in the locker room to be the voice, that guy, the leader. Like, regardless of what's going on the court, LeBron is still the voice. He's the guy there. And, like, he's not going to – what is the longest tenured Celtic now? Like –
I guess it's Marcus Smart.
Yeah, and Marcus Smart is that guy, but I mean, I don't think he's gonna hold back Kyrie from speaking his mind. Is where I'm getting at.
I'm looking that up right now. I mean, but it's Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Marcus Smart, and that's it, right? I mean, that's the only. Oh, Rozier and Terry Rozier.
Oh,
those are the only four players left on the roster.
Yeah.
So I mean, Marcus Smart is of that group. I guess he was drafted before Terry Rozier, so that makes him
technically he's been there a little bit longer.
A little bit longer.
He's the oldest twin.
Yeah, he's the oldest twin. I think that it's going to be a big thing for Hayward. For Kyrie to come in with this new team. I think that last year's team, it probably would have been a little more difficult, a team that had its identity, but this team is about growth and it's about change, and now it's going to be a chance for him to sort of reset the standard for what he is as a player and to get to pair with Hayward. I mean, Hayward is the best player on the Celtics roster right now, and he is also incoming, and I think that's going to be huge for establishing an identity of who's the go-to guy and how those two guys coexist, which are the big questions. I mean, they just are.
It's those questions, and I think it's a great crucible to throw everyone into that right now because, like you said, everything's new. It's basically a whole new team. All we got is Brad, basically. It's scary to think about, but it's exciting. This is a good. I think Kyrie on this roster has superstar in him, and I think we're going to see it this year.
This is like one of those years when you're playing 2K and you just you start the franchise and then you just trade all your players. That's what this season for the Celtics is like. Well, we've got 4 players who are coming back. Let's just trade everybody and see what happens. And
exactly.
Does this? I mean, obviously it does. The Celtics, I think, had a pretty solid offseason. I mean, getting Tatum, getting Hayward, trading for Morris. I felt like it was a pretty successful offseason. How does this move the needle for you? I mean, does this put it into an A+?
I would say so. I think it's pushing it up to 11, if you ask me. Like,
okay.
This is I don't think it gets better than this besides something like KG and Ray Allen for nothing.
Yeah, that was a good summer. I mean, I don't think you're going to top summer 07. So let me ask the question that only the outsider can answer. What's the mindset in the locker room when something like this happens? I mean, everything is different now. Like, what do you think's going on in there?
Man, to be a fly on the wall with that Danny Ainge, Isaiah Thomas conversation, that's probably like an Oscar-winning conversation if that's in a movie. I can't imagine. I think everyone's feeling the entire roller coaster of emotions. That, like, Isaiah was the heart of this team, the heart and soul, and to trade him, man, well, I can't imagine the emotions that went through that locker room today.
Now, you're a New England lifer. Not that you've lived there, just in your heart, you're a New England lifer. Mm-hmm. You know what Isaiah Thomas meant to the city of Boston, being that underdog guy, being that guy who was too small. Yeah. I don't see them taking a shine to Kyrie the same way that Isaiah resonated with the Boston crowd.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, it's hard out there for flat earthers, and you never know who's a flat earther in the Commonwealth.
Oh, no, I didn't even think about that. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a flat earther. No.
Yeah. It's the really only downside of this trade is...
You know what? I'm going back. I had given this trade an A on both sides, but now, oh, God, I'm not going to end up B- for the Celtics.
Get an underdog. Bostonians aren't all that smart, Like, who cares? Flat Earth, round Earth, square Earth.
And you're saying this as a person who has lived in the New England area. I mean, you're calling it like you see it.
If there's any fan base that can embrace someone who doesn't embrace the roundness of Earth, it is the New England fan base for sure.
Okay, so obviously not.
He'll fit right in.
Okay, he's fitting in. Who am I to argue with the outsider? All right, so we've talked about the Brooklyn pick. We've talked about the compensation. I guess my question is Cleveland a legit contender? I mean, we've asked this question 100 times, and we're going to keep asking it because the Warriors exist. And you can't have an NBA podcast without saying the Golden State Warriors at least once. That's in the contract.
Golden State Warriors. They exist.
Does this do either of these teams look competitive?
I mean, yes, in the sense that like Conor McGregor could knock out Floyd.
Ooh, is that your hot
could happen?
Is that your hot take?
Puncher's chance.
That Floyd Mayweather has that Conor McGregor has a puncher's chance.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was.
Okay, all right, but realistically, I mean, do you think that either of these rosters has moved in such a way that we'll see better than a 5-game series? Because I think one thing that certainly has locked in is that this is our Eastern Conference Finals. Boston and Cleveland is.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people will say Washington, but I feel like Washington stood still while Boston got better. So that gap widened. I feel like Boston got better and Cleveland sort of stayed the same. Boston, I feel like of the teams that jumped, they jumped the most. I don't think the 76ers are in that conversation yet. I don't think the Heat are in that conversation. I mean, I think that what we're talking about is Cleveland and Boston for the Eastern Conference Championship, but does it matter?
I would say the Celtics, as constructed now, are a more dangerous team to game plan against in the 7-game series. So I would say the Celtics are better. I would say they're better than Cleveland last year. Oh, that's tough. Oh, yeah, they are. Well, I'm going to say it. Just basically because of Brad Stevens. And I would say, I thought the Celtics last year would have matched up better with the Warriors last year, but now that I'm saying that, we've lost like all the defensive players that could match up well. It'll be an interesting game, but the Warriors are still going to blow us out.
I think it puts I think it puts a lot of pressure on Jaylen Brown, who will be going into his third year, to
think about that.
to make the big jump. And if Jaylen Brown can live up to the hype of being the number 3 pick, a guy with all-world athleticism, a tremendous defender, if he can live up to what I mean, I know that you and I and my brother, I mean, all of us who are Celtics fans have had the conversation of if Jaylen Brown, that starts with those 3 words. But in point of fact, if Jaylen Brown makes the leap into a good player, I'm not even saying great, I'm not saying all-star, I'm just saying if he jumps into being a good player, the Celtics will be a much improved team comparatively, I think.
I would agree 100%. Because he ends up being like a more offensive Bruce Bowen next year, like take some of that defensive, put it into the offensive. I could see that.
He's just, and maybe it's just wishful thinking. Maybe I'm just sitting here saying, please let Jaylen Brown be good, because he is an exciting player. He played so well in Summer League, and to just have him develop at the rate that he should develop, or that I guess that I want him to develop, would be tremendous, and it would just be an asset to add with, because now you're looking at a second unit that your starters are probably Irving, Hayward, Brown, I guess,
probably
Morris and Horford, and then you have a bench that is Gerson Yabusele, Aaron Baines, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum. And that's probably your 9-man rotation. I mean, Shimi Ojale, who absolutely could find his way into a Brad Stevens rotation.
Indeed he could. That guy is dynamite.
And you always have Rozier, but like that's probably the 12 players who are going to see any significant amount of playing time for the Celtics. That seems like a pretty solid roster. I mean, at least when you cut it to 9 in the playoff rotation.
Yep, Jaylen Brown held his own against LeBron last year, and I think as much as anyone, he could hold his own against Kevin Durant as well. The question is if he can be relied upon at all on the offensive side, and if Jaylen Brown takes that leap next year to be a reliable offensive piece, things are looking very green for the Celtics.
Yeah, I always say that you can't play 2 guys who can't shoot together, and that's one of my problems with Brown is. You have Horford. Marcus Morris is an okay shooter. So if Brown's the one guy who can't shoot in that starting lineup, I think he'll be successful. But hopefully he can stretch out his range a little bit.
That's the goal. That's the plan.
All right.
Fingers crossed.
One last question, then I'll let you go. To get back to your whatever it is you do on the West Coast now. But I'll leave you to it. Celtics and the Cavaliers, I don't know. I'm getting ready to ask a question. I don't know. They play each other. Who's more ready for that game? Isaiah Thomas, is he ready to face the Celtics, or is Kyrie Irving ready to face LeBron?
Man, I just want both of them to go in a room and get into a debate, and the winner about who's more ready, because that is like pay-per-view right there to me. Those two guys, I can't imagine two people more ready to play the other team. Like, Kyrie's going to want to prove he's number one. Isaiah's going to want to prove yet again that the team that traded him is a freaking dumb idiot. It's like, I'm getting chills thinking about it, my man. Like,
okay, so I'll give you the rundown while you were letting me know. It's Tuesday, October 17th, opening night in Cleveland.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so if you weren't ready for opening night, now you're ready for it.
That is, I can't think of a legitimately better sporting event right now.
Yeah, because that's going to be the TNT 8 o'clock game. That's going to be, I mean, I was locked in before, but you can't be more locked in after that.
No, you really can't. Oh my God!
If you can't get excited for that, I don't know what you can get excited for.
Well, could legitimately end that night from hype.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. Oh yeah, there was one more thing before I let you go. I know that we've had our ups and downs as fans of Danny Ainge, of Trader Danny, but setting aside the players that are involved in it and thinking about their draft positions, he traded the 60th pick in the 2011 draft for the number 1 pick in the same draft.
The man's a trader.
Yeah, so there you go. That's all I got. You got anything left to add to that?
No. I was thinking about, like, there's an Office episode where Dwight Schrute trades into, like, he trades up onto something.
Where he starts with a thumbtack and he trades all the way to...
Yeah, that's Danny Ainge.
He trades all the way to a telescope. But then, I don't know, then he trades the telescope for beans. Yeah, for magic beans. So let's hope he stops with it. Danny stops with the telescope.
The telescope. Yeah.
Let's just stick with the telescope. All right. Celtics Outsider Andrew Johnson, as always, thanks for joining us on the And One podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll talk to you later.
All right. See you, man.
All right,
Cat on the head.
Special thanks to Andrew Johnson for joining us on the And One podcast. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at And1Analytics. You can follow me personally at @the_Alex_West. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And most importantly, make sure to check 94feetreport.com every day. There's a team of tremendous writers who are putting out content even in the doldrums of summer, even when there's not much to talk about. Guys that are working very hard, beating the bushes, and putting out the best stories. And make sure you're, ready for mid-season. You're already in mid-season form when it comes to being informed. Check it out on 94feetreport.com. Follow them on Twitter. I really appreciate everybody being a part of the show, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me, and it really means a lot to me to know that people are listening and to know that they enjoy the show. So just interact with me in whatever way you can, and we'll keep doing this thing as we roll on into the season. So until next time, I'm your host, Alex West. Good night.